All right, so Mark chapter 6 is where we are. We got partway through this last week, so let's just pick up there and keep going through. Let's start here, chapter 6, verse 1. He went out from there and he came into his hometown. What is Jesus' hometown? Nazareth, that's right. And his disciples followed him. And when the Sabbath had come, he began to teach in the synagogue, and the many listeners were astonished, saying, "Where did this man get these things? And what is this wisdom given to him, and such miracles as these performed by his hands? Is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary, and his brother, of James and Joseph and Judas and Simon? Are not his sisters here with us?" And they took offense at him. And Jesus said to them, "A prophet is not without honor except in his hometown and among his own relatives and in his own household." And he could do no miracle there except that he laid his hands upon a few sick people and he healed them. And he wondered at their unbelief. It's always struck me there that next to last verse, except that he laid his hands upon a few sick people and healed them. It's just so casually thrown in there. He just laid his hands on a few people and made them better. Well, to those people, that's what? That's life. That's everything. And they're just kind of namelessly kind of recorded here. Speaks, I think, here to the hesitancy, to the hard hearts of many of the people with whom Jesus is dealing here in Nazareth. They take offense at Jesus and they reject his teaching. He could do no miracle there, and we talked about this, chapter 6 and verse 5. He did do miracles there. And so what might have restrained him from performing more miracles? Their unbelief. Not that belief is required in order for a miracle to happen, but why would Jesus work miracles? Yeah, to bring people to belief, right? And if they're just not interested in believing, then what good is working a miracle for people who have confirmed that they're not interested in what? In believing, right? You've got this sense of rivalry and unwarranted expectation. The works that you have done elsewhere, what did they say to Jesus? Do them here, right? That's how Luke records it for us. The work that you've done elsewhere, do here. So you've got this sense of unwarranted expectation that because they're from Nazareth, Jesus' hometown, they are certainly due something more, right? And that's just not the way that it works. Good morning, Daniel. And then, of course, God knew what his plan was. That's the rest of the story there in Luke chapter 4. To whom was Elijah sent? None but the widow of Zarephath. To whom was Elisha sent? There were many lepers in Israel, but he was sent to whom? To Naaman, right? The point is, God has his way of working out things, and God's way is always best. And if it's not God's plan to work all of these, who is your teacher? Is it normally Miss Becca? Come on back out here, Daniel. You're good, buddy.
It's the mother of Daniel.
Of Emma Jane and Mia? Yeah. Go grab a seat with your mama. She had to stay home. Her little girl's sick today. Well, Daniel, come on with me, buddy. Let's go find you class. Let's go hang out.
Good job.
I tell you, it's like a sauna going in that classroom back there. Whew. God knew what his plan was, right? There were many widows in Israel, but Elijah was sent to the widow at Zarephath. There were many lepers in Israel, but Elisha was sent to Naaman. The point being, God works out his plan in his own way, and his plan is best. His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. His ways are higher than our ways. And so if God's plan does not require these miracles to be done in Nazareth, then what are we to conclude about that? That's the way it ought to be. That's the way it ought to be. And so there's a number of different reasons here why Jesus might have been restrained from working more miracles there in Nazareth. Then we brought out this point that he marveled, right? He marveled at their unbelief. This is one of the only two times that Jesus is said to have marveled in Scripture. Rebecca, what's the other one? The centurion, that's right. I have not found so great a faith, not even in all of Israel. So what would make Jesus marvel in this moment? Why is Jesus marveling at their unbelief? What causes the Son of God to step back and say, whoa, in this moment? They had every reason to believe. They've got Jesus there performing miracles. They've got Jesus there teaching. They've got Jesus' family that they can go and talk to as witnesses. Perhaps even Mary is here at this point. I mean, it might be an uncomfortable conversation, but Mary is everything that we've heard about Jesus' birth and conception true? There are moment after moment, reason after reason why they had every opportunity to come to belief, and yet what? They don't. And that certainly seems to be what is causing Jesus to marvel. The other time being the centurion who comes to Jesus and expresses faith, and Jesus says, I've not found such great faith, not even in all of Israel. All right, pick up in verse 7. Jesus summons the 12. He sends them out in pairs. He gave them authority, verse 7, over the unclean spirits, instructed them that they should take nothing for their journey except a mere staff, no bread, no bag, no money in their belt, but to wear sandals. And he added, do not put on two tunics. And he said to them, wherever you enter a house, stay there until you leave town. And any place that does not receive you or listen to you, as you go out from there, shake the dust from the sole of your feet off as a testimony against them. And they went out and preached that men should repent. Jesus anticipates, verse 10, that they would have what? Yeah, people that would accept him. Jesus isn't just sending them out just to aimlessly wander. You know, is this the Lord, providentially ordering things? Well, it might be. But he communicates to them that you're going to have the opportunity, you're going to have the you're going to have homes that are open to you along the way, I guess is what I'm trying to say. That they would be cared for. Their needs would be taken care of. And I think this is the great lesson of faith here. The Lord is sending them out. Do they have enough faith to go out and do what he's telling them to do? Because time after time we see the disciples struggling with these crises of faith, right? In fact, we're going to see one a little bit later in chapter 6. Why would Jesus send them out in pairs? Well, it's not because they're lacking something. It's not because any one of them as individuals isn't enough. Jesus has given them power over the unclean spirits here. It's probably because just the reality that when we're going out and doing something difficult, what do we need? We need encouragement. We need support, right? And so that's what the apostles have in each other as they go out and do this work. What was the message that the apostles were sharing? Yeah, repent, not Matthew 6. This was the same mistake as last week, Mark 6. And how was that message confirmed? Through the miracles, signs, and wonders that were performed. That's right. Again, that is, and this is a good theme to hit here. Look over at Hebrews chapter 2. Hebrews chapter 2, why were miracles performed? Why would Jesus work miracles? Why would God select individuals through whom miracles would be performed? I mean, of course it's going to bring healing to someone. It's going to make someone's life easier. I understand all of that. But if we really had to whittle it down and narrow it down to one reason, why were the miracles worked? Say it again, Gloria. To establish their claims. Is that what you're saying? Okay. Rebecca? To bring people to belief. Okay. Validity. Okay. Look at Hebrews chapter 2. For this reason, we must pay much closer attention to what we have heard, lest we drift away from it. Here in the book of Hebrews, you've got people who are starting to regress to the law of Moses. And the argument in the book of Hebrews is, we have a better covenant based upon better promises. We have a better high priest. Instead of turning away from Jesus to the law of Moses, We need to see Jesus as the fulfillment of the law of Moses and press in towards him and focus on him. So the argument here, chapter 2 and verse 1 of Hebrews, we must pay more close attention to what we have heard, lest we drift away from it. Verse 2, for if the word spoken through angels proved unalterable, and every transgression and disobedience received a just reward, the law of Moses, the Ten Commandments, coming down to Moses from God through the mediatorship of angels. That's what's being talked about there in verse 2. And in the law of Moses, if you committed a sin, if you transgressed, what was there? Yeah, well, there's a punishment, right? There's no hope of there's no hope of forgiveness apart from Jesus Christ. But to the point here in Hebrews 2 and verse 2, you do X, here's Y result over here, right? If you accidentally kill someone with the axe head of your axe, well, here's what you do over here. There are punishments and things like that, okay? So verse 3, if that was the case under the law of Moses, verse 3, how shall we escape if we neglect so great a salvation? So now we're moving from the lesser to the greater. We're moving from the law of Moses now to the gospel of Jesus Christ. How shall we escape if we neglect so great a salvation, after it was at the first spoken through the Lord, and it was confirmed to us by those who heard, God also bearing what? God bearing witness. When God is bearing witness, what does that mean? What is he doing when he bears witness? What does that mean? God bears witness to something. He's approving. It's like he's taking his stamp and stamping it. This is authentic. This is from me, right? Okay? God also bearing witness with them. Now, how was God stamping his approval? Signs, wonders, miracles, gifts of the Holy Spirit according to his own will. So if we were to boil it down to one reason, why were the miracles performed? To demonstrate God's approval. Absolutely. Miracles were performed to demonstrate God's approval. God's approval of what? What they were saying. What they were saying. Okay?
Also that he is the true God.
Oh, sure.
Because they were doing a lot of this preaching to pagans and people who believed in millions of gods. Theirs couldn't do those things.
I'm declaring to you the unknown God, right? Yeah, from Acts 17, absolutely. In 2 Corinthians chapter 12 and verse 12, you don't have to turn over there, but this is what Paul says to the Corinthians, again, as Jeff would mention in this kind of idolatrous environment. The signs of a true apostle were performed among you with all perseverance by signs and wonders and miracles. God didn't just expect people to randomly believe Paul because Paul, said, I saw a great light. You believed Paul. Why? He could demonstrate that the message he was sharing was from whom? Was from God. Yeah, I'm declaring to you the true God, and just so you know I'm declaring to you the true God, silver and gold I do not have, but what I have I give to you. In the name of Jesus of Nazareth, rise up and walk. Now, that wasn't Paul, that was Peter, but you get the point, right? You were thinking that, weren't you? Yeah, You were thinking, that's Acts chapter 4, Acts chapter 3, right? Paul's not even on the scene yet, Tyler. You didn't get enough sleep last night, Tyler. You didn't get a good shower this morning, Tyler. That's right. Exactly. All right, Mark chapter 6 and verse 14. I never thought my last week at Judson Road would involve me having to boil my water. Or 8 inches of snow. Our moving pod couldn't arrive, right? We gotta wait. Fun. All of you that have extra garage space at your house, guess what you're getting? A load of Tyler's stuff. Mark chapter 6, verse 14. Audrey Udy, what do we have in Mark 6 and verse 14? What is this? In Mark, what is this? Yes, we have another sandwich. You answered it last week. I was going to give you a chance to look really smart in front of everybody. Right? So we go from verses 7 through 13 about the sending out of the 12. And then if you skip down with me to verse 30, we come back to what? the 12, and now they're returning to Jesus. But in the middle, verses 14 through 29, what do we have? All of a sudden, we're talking about John the Baptist and Herod. Now, why in the world? He heard what the apostles were doing. That's kind of our segue here. Okay? He has a guilty conscience, right? And if we're looking at Mark, this is another one of Mark's sandwiches. What is a Mark sandwich? Don't say peanut butter and jelly. The meat's in the middle, right? We've got right? If you remember your poetry from your prose from literature class, you've got ABA. Okay? A story, B story, back to A story. Here it's apostles, John the Baptist, apostles. We're talking about the apostles, but in the middle we're going to talk about John the Baptist, but it's still going to relate to whom? To the apostles. Okay? So Jesus has sent them out in pairs. They're going to come back to him in verse 30, but in the middle, Mark transitions to this story about John the Baptist. So this Herod, John the Baptist story is sandwiched by the account of Jesus sending out the apostles in pairs. So what happens in this story of John the Baptist and Herod? Rebecca started us off here. Herod hears of the work that the apostles are doing, and he thinks what in verse 14? John the Baptist has risen from the dead, and therefore these miraculous powers are at work in him. John's back. Why would it worry Herod that John is back? Because he killed him. Okay, right? The guy that I killed is back from the dead to haunt me. Okay? Why had Herod put John the Baptist to death? Yeah, because John the Baptist had the gall to say what to Herod? Yeah, the woman that you are married to, it's not legitimate, right? She's not your wife. You have your brother's wife, right? Philip? Let's see here, verse 15. Others were saying he is Elijah. Others were saying he is a prophet like one of the prophets of old. But when Herod heard of it, he kept saying, John, whom I have beheaded, is risen. For Herod himself had sent and had John arrested and bound in prison on account of Herodias, the wife of his brother Philip, because he had married her. For John had been saying to Herod, it is not lawful for you to have your brother's wife. So really it's not even Herod that's going to throw him in prison. Who's in back of all of this? Herodias. Does this sound like anything Old Testament? Jezebel, right. So, verse 19, Herodias had a grudge against him and wanted to kill him, but could not do so. For Herod was afraid of John, knowing that he was a righteous and holy man, and he kept him safe. And when he heard him, he was very perplexed, but he used to enjoy listening to him. He's got something novel to say. He's a little bit different than the other guys. He's out here in his camel's hair, eating honey and locusts. This guy's kind of different. I enjoyed listening to him. Well, a strategic day came when Herod on his birthday gave a banquet for his lords and military commanders and the leading men of Galilee. And when the daughter of Herodias herself came in and danced, she pleased Herod and his dinner guests. And the king said to the girl, ask me for whatever you want and I will give it to you. Not a smart thing, is it? See this in the Old Testament as well, kind of these open-ended promises. The first thing that comes out of my house, I'm going to sacrifice to you. Things like that. Verse 23, he swore to her, whatever you ask of me, I will give to you up to half of my kingdom. And she went out and said to her mother, what shall I ask for? And she said, the head of John the Baptist. Immediately she came in haste before the king asked, saying, I want you to give me right away the head of John the Baptist on a platter. And although the king was very sorry, yet because of his oaths and because of his dinner guests, he was unwilling to refuse her. Immediately the king sent an executioner and commanded him to bring back his head, and he went and beheaded him in the prison, and brought his head on a platter and gave it to the girl, and the girl gave it to her mother. And when the disciples heard about this, they came and took away his body, and they laid it in a tomb. So a whole lot going on here, a whole lot about Herod, right? Herod has some interest in what John the Baptist has to say. But what rules the day here in this story? It's pride. Okay? The daughter of Herodias comes and dances before them, and if kind of exterior biblical sources can be trusted, this was a rather provocative dance for Herod, his lords, his military commanders. So it's kind of like the guy's night out scene at the birthday party, and Herod seems to communicate here in a way that would not be typical of a leader in his right mind, correct? I'm going to give you whatever you want up to half my kingdom. Who does that sound like? Yeah? Back to the story of Esther. Sounds like somebody who's probably not in his right mind. Probably not in his right mind. Why? Probably been overindulgent, right? So ask me for whatever you want and I will give it to you. Whatever you want up to half my kingdom. And so she went out and said to her mother, what shall I ask for? Now, what does this tell you about Herodias? Say it again. Evil to the core. Had a lot of weaknesses. What'd you say, Rebecca? Very dictatorial. I mean, look, you could set up your family for life for generations to come. And instead she wants what? She wants the head, not of somebody who's out there causing problems, the head of a prisoner. When he's already in prison, what's he going to do? Not much. It kind of gives us an insight into what anger and hatred can do to us. They can blind us so much that here you've got the offer of just about anything your mind could imagine, and hate has so overcome this person that she wants what? She wants revenge. She wants someone dead, and that's what's going to bring her peace. And she uses her child to do it. Yeah, you've got a whole lot of things going on here with Herodias that are just galling, right? She seems to have no qualms with the daughter getting up and doing this dance in front of all of these men. Seems to see it as a way to finagle her way into getting what she wants, so she's willing to use other people as sort of her pawns in this greater chess game. She's just not a good character. Nothing really good about Herodias shines through in this story. For Herod, at least you can say, hey, he didn't want to kill John the Baptist, and he was kind of interested in listening to what he had to say. At least for the daughter of Herodias, you could say, well, at least her first thought isn't to go out and murder somebody. But you look at Herodias, there's nothing redeeming in this story.
But of all the people she went to, she had to go to Mama.
Something to be said for trying to get wisdom. It's also a cautionary tale about the people that we go to for wisdom. Just because someone is older than me doesn't mean they have wisdom. Just because somebody might be my parent. I can say that because we don't have a lot of, young kids in here this morning. But just because someone might be a parent doesn't mean they're wise, right? So, what could we say about Herod in verse 26? He kept his... Debbie, looking at the bright side of things, he kept his word. Yes. I don't know if keeping your word in this situation would be the best of things. And you're shaking your head no. All right. He was sorry. He was prideful and he was a coward. The two seem to go hand in hand quite often. Right? When you've got those list of virtues over in 2 Peter, add to your faith, what's our next one? Virtue. That Greek word there, arete, it's the idea of moral courage. It's interesting, that's the very next thing the Lord would tell us to add. You've got faith, you've got this foundation. To build on that foundation, you need what? Moral courage. What is moral courage? Yeah, the drive to live up to your faith. the drive, the willingness, the compunction to go out and do what is right, even when doing what is right is difficult. What should Herod have said here? Should have said, I'm not going to do that. Why does he acquiesce to her request? It was going to make him look weak.
Couldn't be trusted.
Say what? Yeah, because of the people he has surrounded himself with. Peer pressure, right? Somebody says, well, peer pressure doesn't exist. Well, the story of Herod would attest otherwise. He wants to do this so that he looks powerful, so that he looks, if trustworthy is the word, then use the word trustworthy, to those whom he is over. If any of those people are good-hearted, and I know that's a stretch here in this story, but if any of those people are good-hearted, what do they see in this episode? Do you see someone who is trustworthy? No, you see somebody who's going to sell out people that he likes, on a moment's notice. It's a cautionary tale to us about the kind of people we surround ourselves with and the kind of people that we determine we want to please. Right? One of the things that we need to learn as God's people, one of the lessons we need to especially instill within our children, is the courage to disappoint the right people. Some people need to be disappointed by our behavior. And it's the people who would expect us to do whatever is contrary to God's will. Those people need to be disappointed in us. And it's okay when they are. People should have been disappointed in Herod's response to her request. Okay? Herodias should have been gravely disappointed. But you don't have the moral courage here to do what is right. And so Herod gives in. He was very sorry, yet because of his oaths and because of his dinner gifts, he was unwilling to refuse her. Who does this sound like a few chapters later in the book of Mark? Who's very sorry about something that's going to happen? Pilate. Exactly. Pilate. He washes his hands. Don't do anything to this man, his wife. I've suffered many things in a dream because of him. Let me release someone else. They say, no. Pilate says, my hands are tied. They weren't really. So, yes, Jeff, I'm sorry.
To build on what you were saying about
Yes.
I thought of this. This is really, we hear a whole lot about the Pharisees. We hear a little about the Sadducees. We hardly ever hear about the Herodians.
Yeah.
This is the Herodians.
Yes.
These are the people who don't care anything about religion or the law. I mean, they're very nominally Jewish.
Yeah.
But their real interest is money, power, and pleasure.
Yep.
And why are they not ever the ones arguing with Jesus? Because they couldn't care less.
They don't care. They're apathetic.
And they're not there.
Yep.
But they're at his banquet.
Yeah, they're here. So, let's get back to our Mark sandwich idea because I think that's important here. You just randomly have this story about John the Baptist. We haven't heard really about John the Baptist since chapter 1. Now, all of a sudden, he makes a random appearance here in chapter 6. And that's really the end of it going forward in Mark's gospel account. Why? Why throw in this little interruption about John the Baptist?
Foreshadowing for the apostles.
Okay, so Clint, this story about John the Baptist helps us understand, fits in with this narrative of the apostles because it talks about persecution. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, they're going to be killed.
Okay. Just like John the Baptist suffered for his faith and his service, they might suffer as well. Okay.
Wasn't it
Rebecca?
First, Martyr, James, beheaded the same.
Yeah, James, martyr. Rebecca?
It might be a transition. John had been a leader spiritually.
Mhm.
People,
He must increase, I must decrease. Okay?
The emphasis on Christ and his teaching and the apostles
Okay.
and their teaching.
Glenn?
Well, they're being rejected.
Uh-huh.
And then he's telling them to go out and teach, and then you tell them something worse that someone did for you,
Yeah.
and then these little things don't seem quite as big.
Okay. Yeah.
Encouragement.
Somebody telling you to get out of town is not nearly as bad as getting your head cut off by a conniving, hard-hearted person. Okay. I think those are all good thoughts. Here's just a couple I threw down. It's an account of a servant of God preaching repentance. Right? What message were the apostles out preaching? Repentance. Okay. What is John the Baptist saying to Herod? Repent. It's not right for you to have your brother's wife. Okay. Perhaps it's reassurance that while John was martyred, that would not yet happen to the apostles. This is what happened to John the Baptist, but I have sent you out. You've got a mission. What is Jesus going to commission the apostles ultimately to do? Go into all the world, preach the gospel to every creature. Okay? Until that work is accomplished, what are the apostles as a group going to be? Alive. Right? It's very similar to the promise made to Abraham. Right? That through your seed all the nations of the earth are going to be blessed. Well, if Abraham doesn't have a seed yet in Genesis 12 and Genesis 13, does he need to fear those various kings and nations taking his life? No. Because God hasn't done what? God hadn't fulfilled his promise yet. Same kind of thing possibly going on here. Or along the lines of what Clint was saying, perhaps it's a candid confession here. That if we are going to be servants of Christ, we must be willing to suffer even to the point of death for his cause. I've called you to go out. I've called you to go out and to teach, to go out and preach, to serve me. The reality is, part of that service to me may lead where? May lead to death. But there are fates worse than death. Take up the cross and follow after me. And so then you get to verse 30. And the apostles gathered around with Jesus, and they reported to him all that they had done and all that they had taught. I think that's probably significant there. Taught ties us into those previous two episodes. They were to go out and preach repentance. That's what John the Baptist was preaching, and here in verse 30, they talked to Jesus about what they taught. So, anyway, just something maybe to help us with that little sandwich that appears here. Jeff?
It may be that this worked out good for the beginning of the gospel, because if the king is remorseful and afraid, well, I don't remember any of the persecutions of Jesus and the apostles in the early days coming from the government.
Yeah.
They were from the Pharisees.
Mm-hmm. It's not the Herodians. It's not Herod who's trying to stamp him out at this point. It's the Jews, especially the Jewish aristocracy, who see him as a threat to their power hold on the people at this point. All right, let's pick up here in verse 31. They have gone out two by two. They return to Jesus and give a report. And then what does Jesus say in verse 31? Take a break. It's okay. Right? In our world today that idolizes busy, what do we need to do sometimes? Rest. Right? This doesn't mean you sleep till 11 every day, right? And then stay up till 4 o'clock in the morning. That's not the point. Doesn't mean you sit on your couch eating bonbons and drinking RC Cola and doing all that day in and day out. But it's okay to do what? It's okay to take some time to yourself. It's okay to rest. In fact, more than being okay, it's necessary sometimes. So Jesus calls away his disciples, and says in verse 31, "Come away by yourselves to a lonely place and rest a while." For there were many people coming and going, and they did not even have time to eat. What does Mark mention a whole lot in his gospel account? Eating. I think Mark and I would probably get along pretty well, right? He talks a lot about eating, which fits. He's giving us a gospel of action. But he talks here about, just adds in the fact they had not even had time to eat. So, I don't know about that, Corey. I don't know if Mark liked onions. Verse 32, they went into a boat to a lonely place by themselves. Not only is it okay to rest sometimes, it's okay to pull back for a little while. This doesn't mean that you isolate yourself. But it does mean that sometimes if we're going to rest, have you ever seen people that are so busy in the service of others that eventually it just completely burns them out? And rather than hitting that point of burnout, what's the better thing to do? Step back. This doesn't mean step back forever. It doesn't mean step back for a week. It doesn't mean step back for a month. It may just be a day. It may be 2 days. It may be a few hours. But you step back. This is especially true when you're caring for a dying loved one. When you're dealing with a loved one with a serious malady. Sometimes that can be the most difficult thing, is to step back for a moment. But why would you be stepping back? To refresh yourself. Not because you don't love. Is Jesus calling the disciples back because they don't love people here? Because they're not concerned about people? No. They cannot serve the way they need to serve if they have no energy. And we need to remember that when we inevitably go through those moments in our lives. There's nothing wrong with going home and grabbing a shower and a bite to eat and a nap. That's okay. We're not superhuman. Here's God incarnate in the flesh who comes into the bottom level of the boat, and what's he doing? He's taking a nap. Here's the Son of God in the flesh who after 40 days of fasting was what? Hungry. If Jesus can get tired and get hungry, guess what? You can get hangry. Eat something and take a nap. It's okay. It's not a sign of weakness. It's not a sign of a lack of love. It's not a sign of complacency. It's a recognition that the bodies that we have are limited. And in order to get the most out of them and to be as useful as God wants us to be, sometimes we need to what? Sometimes we need to step back. That doesn't mean forever. That doesn't mean always. But it does mean those times come. What did Jesus' compassion lead him to do here? Picking up in verse 33, the people saw them going, and many recognized them, and they ran there together on foot from all the cities, and got there ahead of them. And disembarking, he saw a great multitude, and he felt compassion for them. Felt compassion for them because they were like sheep without a shepherd, and he began to teach them many things. So what does his compassion lead him to do? Jesus' compassion for people led him to teach. Interesting, that's the first thing that's mentioned there. Flies in the face of the critiques of Christianity today. Well, if you really care about people, you're going to go out and do what? Dig a well? Build a house? Build a hospital? Now, is there anything wrong with those things? No. Are those things good? Yeah. What's the most important thing? Sharing the gospel. So that's what Jesus does first. Is that going to be the only thing he does here? Nope. He began to teach them many things. Verse 35, and when it was already quite late, his disciples came up to him and began saying, this place is desolate, and it is already quite late. Let's send the people away so that they may go into surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat. Teachers can get carried away sometimes, right?
No.
Never. You've never ever thought, Tyler, shut up. You've preached too long. I'm hungry. So they said, Jesus, let's give the people a break. Let's send them away. Let them go get something to eat. And Jesus' response in verse 37 is what? I love this. teacher, let's let the people go, let them get something to eat. You give them something to eat. Now, I'm sure he didn't say it like that. You give them something to eat. What in the world? Jesus, this was just a request. Why are you responding back like that? Thoughts? Pardon? Oh, he had just given them power, right? He'd given them power. What did he rebuke them for in chapter 4? Yep. He's trying to build their faith here. When he calms the storm, "O you of little faith," he's trying to build their faith. You give them something to eat. And they start, twiddling their thumbs and getting all in a hurry. Well, shall we go and spend 200 denarii on bread and give them something to eat? Is that what we ought to do? And how much is 200 denarii?
8 months of wages.
Yeah, 8 months. The amount of money that you would make in 8 months at your job, that's what it was going to take to feed this crowd of thousands. Yeah, if you had not left your job, yeah. So, what are we to do, Jesus? You give them something to eat. How many loaves do you have? Go look. And they went out and they find 5 loaves and 2 fishes. Who'd they find it from? Little boy who had brought a sack lunch that day. 5 loaves, 2 fish. He commanded them all to recline by groups on the green grass. They reclined in companies of hundreds and of 50s. He took the 5 loaves, 2 fish, looked towards heaven, blessed it, broke it, divided it. Everybody ate. They picked up how many baskets full of fragments? 12 baskets full, right? John 6:6 tells us Jesus asked this question to them knowing what he was going to do. He's seeing if their faith has progressed. But they missed it, right? They missed this lesson just like they're going to miss the next lesson in chapter 6 in verses 51 and 52 when they're astonished that Jesus could walk on the water. All right, we'll wrap up there. Pick up next Sunday morning. Appreciate your attention.